everything we do, it goes in that book and it makes us who we are today. So to me, that's what the art of storytelling means.
This is the Storytelling for Sales podcast, a show about leveraging the power of storytelling to ignite your sales performance and grow your business.
Hi, and welcome back to Storytelling for Sales podcast. I'm your host, Ed Bilat, and thank you for joining our show. Our guest today comes from telecommunication industry and is a great leader of 500 plus employees. He is a group vice president of Mediacom Communication Corporation, which happens to be the fifth largest cable operator in the United States, serving over 1.3 million customers. He is also the president of Minnesota Cable Association. Bill Jensen joining us today from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we're going to talk about sales, storytelling, and leadership in one of the most competitive industries of all, the cable industry. Just a quick shout out to our sponsors at storytellingsales.com, a leading authority on making sales human, and also a good company to talk to for storytelling-based sales training solutions to grow your business. Without further ado, Bill Jensen, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Ed. Looking forward to speaking with you and, getting some information out for not just you, but your listeners.
Okay, great. I'm thrilled to have you with us today. We have a lot of things to talk about and great stories to discover, I'm sure. But before we do this, here is our traditional question. What business success story inspires you and why?
Well, getting out of the personal realm, I'm quite a fan of Malcolm Forbes. One of the things I recall about Malcolm Forbes is that he has many people in multi-billion-dollar investment strategy, and he has many people that would report to him, and we're talking about senior vice presidents, directors, etc., that aren't afraid to take risks. A lot of times, I think in business and in life, we're so fearful of taking a risk. Now, granted, when you're talking about Malcolm Forbes and his various industries, you're talking about sometimes risking millions of dollars. But the story I recall with him is that one of his senior vice presidents made a very bad investment. And the next morning after the news broke, he came in to see Mr. Forbes and brought in a box with all of his personal belongings and handed him his resignation. And Malcolm Forbes said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I lost a lot of money for you and your companies, and I feel bad about it, and I figure I'd save you the trouble of letting me go." And Mr. Forbes said, "Look, I appreciate your owning up to it. You made a mistake, but I want you to take risks. Just don't let it happen again." So,
wow.
I think that certainly is a great success story, one that I always think of when I'm working without a safety net, either in my personal life or in business.
No, great story, and a great leadership example to consider. So no, thank you for sharing this. Okay, so let's talk about the cable industry. You're very well known for your passion for the industry. For example, in addition for being a group vice president at Mediacom, you're also the president of Minnesota Cable Communication Association. And you've been doing it for 34 years?
Yes. I've been a cable guy for 34 years and the president of the Minnesota Cable Communications Association for 8, right? Yeah.
Wow. So how did you even pick this industry?
Well, it's a great opening question. After I was born and raised outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my senior year of high school, I just didn't think I would be a great college student. I wasn't ready for that. And
wow, what a conclusion.
Even though I thought I was a pretty good football player in high school, I didn't get any college football scholarship offers. So I knew my senior year, in the early winter of my senior year, I might want to follow my dad and join the Army, which I did. The Army, this was right after Vietnam, but the Army offered a lot of opportunities. So I did that. I parachuted out of jets, airplanes, and helicopters, started as a private, and then many years later finished as a captain in the Army Reserve. But when I came back to Wisconsin after my
Wow.
active duty and then picked up an Army Reserve stint, I started going to college, the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater, a small 10,000 student campus just about an
Mm-hmm.
hour outside of Madison, the big campus in Wisconsin, and got involved in the communications curriculum at the University of Wisconsin and started working at the campus radio and TV station. Inevitably, ended up graduating with a degree in communications, an emphasis in radio and television, and a minor in journalism. And I truly thought after another active duty stint and heading out to New England, where my wife is from, she said, look for a job out
Mm-hmm.
here. And I picked Boston, and I really thought I'd end up in the TV industry in Boston, probably not in front of the camera, because I think I have a face for radio, but behind the camera, maybe doing some production and things like that. And
Beautiful voice.
yeah, well, thank you. And then, so the long and short of it is, I was offered an opportunity to build, operate, and maintain two small TV studios, what we call local access television studios, in 1984 in Foxborough, Massachusetts, for a privately held cable communications company called Cablevision Industries. And I did that for a year. I did a pretty good job, I guess, and they offered to make me a general manager in the cable industry. And a year and a half
Wow.
into the cable industry, I was transferred to New York and became an assistant manager in 1985, and the rest is history. So it's been a great industry,
Wow.
great industry.
Oh, no, great, great. So I watched your early interviews, and you were sharing that cable industry actually started in 1950s somewhere in the mountains of Pennsylvania, right, with the with the rooftop antennas.
Yes.
And we witnessed, and certainly you have seen it being transformed to new technologies, such as high-speed data, pay-per-view, video on demand. So you saw all this. So it's fascinating. But isn't it like really hard to compete in the cable business today?
It's anything worthwhile doing should be challenging, Ed. I won't claim fame to that saying, but it's very challenging. There are so many competitors out there. I remember when I started in the industry in the early 80s there, 1984, the regulating authorities and the consumers all
Hmm.
thought that our only form of competition was the movie theaters, were the movie theaters and the local video rental store. Back then, they were renting Betamax tapes. Okay, then they went to
Uh-huh.
VHS.
So there was no blockbuster, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then as we got into the 90s, I think it was 1992, the 18-inch digital satellite system was being deployed throughout the country. So instead of only farmers who had a lot of land and were out in the country and could put those big 6 to 8 to 10 foot dishes in their backyard without any problem, the average person who might want to put a dish in their backyard, they lived in a city somewhere and they didn't have the room for it. So
Hmm.
the 18-inch dishes really changed our industry because those dishes could easily be mounted on the roof or the windowsill. And that really changed our industry. And then fast forward as we got into the 21st century, into 2001, the telephone companies, the wired line, twisted pair
Yeah.
copper wire phone companies thought, hey,
Yeah.
we should get into
Yeah, they came
the
to your
video
space as
business.
well, right? So,
That's right. So our industry began transforming from the 20th century into the 21st century from just a simple, well, nothing simple in business, but a single play video only provider to very quickly in 2000, 2001, a telephone provider and a broadband, a high speed internet provider. So what we call the triple play. And really, for example, I have 6 states at Mediacom and 188 communities right here in the state of Minnesota. And, there's a lot of competition. I can't think of any phone company. There's only a couple that we compete with that don't also offer all three services: video,
mhm.
high speed internet, and telephony. So it's highly competitive.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I watched your commercials about the office of tomorrow and the ways you can transform your business. It's absolutely fascinating. Uh, could you tell us maybe one or two things which makes Mediacom unique in the go-to-market strategy? In other words, what type of stories excite your customers and partners?
It's interesting when we look at a company like Mediacom, a company so rich in history, especially because our founder and our chairman and CEO, Rocco Commisso, is an Italian immigrant, came to this
Hmm.
country into New York City when he was 15, 16 years old. And I ended up working with Rocco Commisso at our previous company in upstate New York, Cablevision Industries, where Rocco was our chief financial officer. And then when our company's Cablevision Industries sold to Time Warner, Rocco wasn't ready to leave the industry or retire, and he took his money and investments and founded Mediacom Communications Corporation. And I
In
think,
92, I think,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
well, 1995, actually.
95.
And
Okay.
so,
Hmm.
what I think is great about a company like Mediacom, number one, the history that we talked about, especially with an immigrant creating Mediacom. And now we have over 4,500 employees in 22 states. But I think what is most interesting is Rocco has worked very hard to put the right people in place, especially at our corporate and our division offices that allow us when he founded the company, it was a privately held company, and then it went public on the NASDAQ, like a lot of cable
Hmm.
companies did. And then Rocco bought the company back probably 7, 8 years ago, took it private again. And even though we're a large company over 22 states, we're able to move very quickly because other than recommendations and things like that that come from Rocco's team, Rocco is really the person that ends up making those decisions. He doesn't need to wait for a board of directors. He can move very quickly when we're talking about new technology deployments, customer service improvements. I think we're very fleet of foot. And I think that's what makes Mediacom unique and exciting as a telecommunications provider.
No, I love it. Absolutely love it. I can certainly relate to the an immigrant story, right? So I'm one of them. I came with $5 to
Mm,
this continent, so I know how hard it is to start
yes.
with nothing, right? And to be able to build a company from nothing. And you guys, what you're the fifth largest cable operator in the U.S., 1.3 million customers, right? So like to take it public and then take it private, so that's a tremendous commitment and effort. So I can certainly relate into that. Thank you for sharing this. Okay, so now let's talk about the second circle, your leadership circle. Again, shared with you now, you're group vice president. You have been in the senior management positions for many years as a general manager, as a president. You support a lot of people. And then I saw then you went into cable industry back in 1984, as you mentioned. Uh, Almost immediately you went into management. Why manage people? Why be a leader?
You know, it's been often said that leaders are not born, they're developed. And, I think of growing up with my dad always behind my brother and I and pushing us. My dad is in the Wisconsin
Hmm.
Baseball Hall of Fame. So, I grew up watching my dad not just play, but coach and manage a semi professional baseball team. And then in high school, whether it's on a football team or wrestling or track and field or any activity you do in high school, and then later in college, we're all presented in college or in our personal lives or in business opportunities to lead. And there's that saying, I think we it came from the Army, but it's lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. And not everybody, yeah, not
Uh-huh.
everybody is perhaps wants to lead. And even if they want to lead, not everybody's going to be a great leader. Some people want to come to work in the morning or whatever their shift is, and at the end of their shift, they want to go home and not have any worries. And you know what, Ed? That's
Yeah.
fine. But in a lot of businesses and
Yeah.
industry and things like that, you do need somebody to take the lead and help guide the various teams. And that's what, I think I've been doing all my life in
Hmm.
various cable telecom situations I've been at, and also in the military. Being a leader takes responsibility, it takes patience, and it takes experience to end up becoming a good and effective leader.
Mm. Great, great. I love that. So from early days on, you have that role example, your father, and obviously the sports exposure to sports, to competitives, when you were able to lead the people, right, and use that experience. So I like it.
Yes. Yeah.
So I know a lot of people don't like to use the word sales, right? So, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna ask you that. How often do you have to sell as a leader?
We always look at our lives. We have a personal life, a life at home or with our family and friends, and then we have a work life, no matter what you're doing. And I think whether it's at home in our personal lives or in our business lives, we're selling every day. We're always selling something. I might, when I get home at the end of the day, both my wife and I ride Harley Davidson motorcycles, and
Oh, cool.
I might want to get out and ride with a few of my friends, but she doesn't. I know I have to sell her on the concept that, hey, I'll only be a little while. By the way, I'll stop and pick up that bottle of wine you like. Okay. So it's selling. And I'm not talking about bribing or anything, but we're always selling. The same thing is at work. And selling isn't just generating revenue, it's motivating people. And we're selling our employees. They might be in sales, and I know we'll talk about that some more, but we're also selling our employees that have to go out in the heat or the bitter cold, 2 feet deep snow, et cetera, that, hey,
Right.
our customers need us and they need you to be on time and they need you to do the job the right way the first time. So I think selling is really a part of our everyday lives, whether it's selling a product or a principle or just selling, a philosophy. So it's important. We
Hmm.
do it every day.
Yeah, so like you don't have to call it selling. It could be, educating, motivating, helping, leading, right? So like there's a bunch of other words we can use in that place.
Yes.
It's just the whole negative sort of perception people have the moment you say sales guy, right? So right away it's not going to be ethical. It's going to be something borderline, gray area, right? Type of thing. So, what type of stories actually work, like in terms of helping your employees or helping your customers?
Mhm.
Is there anything in particular which basically worked in your experience?
Well, I think, Ed, that whether, again, in our personal lives or our work lives, examples are a key resource or tool that I've been able to utilize to motivate either my employees, my peer group, or my kids. For
Hmm.
example, when you're teaching your son or daughter how to mow the lawn, I mean, there's a safety issue that the lawnmower is
Sure.
dangerous, but we know how we want our lawns mowed, and we say, okay, Jim, I want to show you this, and this is, and you got to keep it straight, blah blah blah, and you learn by doing, and that's what I tried to do with my kids. They're all older now, but I would, just like our sergeants would teach us in the military, you do the task, you talk about the task, you teach the task, and then you perform the task, and you say, do you have any questions? This is what I'm looking for. Now you try it. And I
Hmm.
think I've had the same success in the cable telecommunications industry here, whether it's working
Hmm.
with pure salespeople, whether they're direct or door to door salespeople selling our cable telecom products, knocking on the doors, or indirect, that being telemarketers or inbound call center employees. You tee up examples for them so that if the door gets slammed in their face or if the potential customer hangs up on them, you give them some examples on how to get over those objections and move on to the next potential
Right.
customer. So I think examples are important, and examples are literal in anything we do in life. So,
No, that's great. So I think you mentioned a couple of very important points. So the first one, as a leader, you need to be able to perform those tasks
mhm,
yourself, right? In order to demonstrate that, it's just coming into fitness arena, right? And saying, okay, well, I'm going to teach you how to get a six pack, right? But if you don't have one yourself, right, how convincing is that going to
correct.
be, right? So the same in a leadership position. So are you able to go on a sales call with your reps right? Are you able to make that first call, and are you able to face a rejection or work with a particular objection? Or are you just some guy who sits in the office and just, gives orders, right? People will immediately see that, right? So I think that that's very important. And then the second point, which I think is really important, is prepare ahead of time, right? So have those stories, the ways to cope with the stress, with a particular situation ahead of time, so you're not in a panic mode. So like I thank you so much for sharing this. So in terms of the leadership, what challenges do you see facing many of today's leaders?
Well, certainly here in the United States, the economy is continuing to grow, and that's caused labor shortages. So I think in today's, certainly the technology world, there are not
Hmm.
enough qualified applicants out there to satisfy our needs. So in some cases, we are bringing new employees on board with the understanding that they're not going to be able to go on the phone on day one. Most of our
Right.
customer contact personnel, especially those on the phone, I can remember years ago in our industry, in the cable industry, where you'd hire a customer service rep to take a sales, a service, or a billing inbound call, and you'd put them on the phone on day one. That doesn't happen now at Mediacom and most telecom companies for at least a month to 2 months. So we're finding
Hmm.
that we have to invest more in the recruiting, the hiring, the training, and then the retention of those employees. And last but not least, and it's not their fault, but the majority of the talent pool now, out of high school and even college, they're millennials, and they look at
Hmm.
things and approach business differently than what perhaps some of us who might be baby boomers or whatever are used to approaching. So
Hmm.
it's a challenge. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So for the new graduates, or people just joining the workforce, right? So what would you think would be the most critical skill they need to have in order to thrive today, in order to
Mm.
move quickly?
Probably the most important part, and we love when applicants have a technology background, either through work experience or they might have a technical degree, or Cisco or a Windows certification. I mean, that's found money when you can find those talents in applicants. One of the most important attributes of a new recruit or an applicant that we're looking for is how good are they at communicating? Are they constantly looking at their cell phone? Are they tweeting? Are they Facebooking? We need people, especially in the communications industry, we need them to be very good communicators and not just with their thumbs. They need to practice good interpersonal communication skills and be able to interact with our customers either on the phone or in person. So we need to make sure they're good communicators.
So that's right, to have that human connection, right? Because yeah,
Yes, yes.
to have that communication channel opened, and say like, I'm real, I do exist. It's not a machine talking to you, because this is how we connect as people. So I know I love that portion.
Hmm.
So, well, fascinating story. So Bill, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, so I'll ask you our traditional question as well. In terms of your career and leadership in the industry, what does the art of storytelling mean to you?
Excellent. From my perspective, Ed, the art of storytelling is all about interpersonal communications, two-way communications, and understanding that every person, every employee, every customer on every day is writing their own story, that being a chapter a day in their own book. And I think everybody that we come in contact with or ourselves, no matter what industry we work in, we're writing a story. And we need to be mindful of our past experience, but not let it cloud the various directions that either we want to go or need to go to be successful in both life and in business. So everything we do, it goes in that book and it makes us who we are today. So to me, that's what the art of storytelling means.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's a profound answer. So we're creating our own book to share and the treasure for generations to come. So beautiful way to end the interview. So thank you so much, Bill, for coming to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
That does it for this episode of Storytelling for Sales. You'll find show notes and links on our webpage, storytellingsales.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.